Well, hello there and Happy New Year to you all. I'm Paul from IFAS and the Irish Astronomical Association, and we're going to look at some of the night sky in January, with a particular emphasis this time on the solar system. We'll be doing deep sky next month, but it's all too much, I think, to try and cram everything in to one. So let's see what's happening. Our customary look at the sun. The sun has been very, very active, actually, over the last month or so. And this is a real calming down, actually, this situation. But in December, there was a line of several spots right across mostly the southern hemisphere, and that seems to be a thing with this solar cycle, that the sunspots are coming early in the southern hemisphere rather than the northern hemisphere. And I seem to remember, actually, in cycle 24, it was the other way around. There must be a reason for that. But we've got this group 2922 here, 2916 here, and actually just the last couple of days, a new group has appeared on the southeastern corner here that is 2924. So when we look at the stats of all this, we've now got the final figures in for 2021, and there were 64 spotless days in 2021. That's 18% of all days. Compare that with 2020 when there were 208, and you can see that solar cycle 25 really is now getting into its stride. 281, which was a record minimum, or at least a 100-year record minimum from 2019. This compares nicely with 2010, actually, where there were 51 spotless days, and that's pretty much as you'd expect, as this is an 11-year cycle. So that's how the sun's looking at the minute. Now, I showed you this graph before, and this was the original prediction for solar cycle 25, which was predicted to be a bit similar to 24, that is to say a bit lower than the three before it. But actually that's being a bit revised upwards now. One group, McIntosh et al., are actually saying that it's going to be right up there with 23 and even 22 before it, which were much bigger cycles than the previous 24. The mean since 1755 is a bit higher too. So we'll keep the fingers crossed. It does look as if 25 is being quite a big cycle. Now, there are some things going on. There have been auroras spotted in the last sort of 3 or 4 months from the island of Ireland, both north and south. There have been good photographs taken, and we hope that continues. The spectacular stuff is still a bit further north than us, I think, and there is a coronal hole pointing our way at the minute, and there's solar wind coming out of that could arrive on January the 8th or 9th, so nicely over the weekend. But there's great stuff happening further north. This was Tromsø in Norway, and Eva Christensen got this on New Year's Day up in Tromsø. Lovely rays and lovely structure to the aurora there, and great foreground scenery too. So that's it is all happening. Now, I'm going to focus a lot on the planets here, actually, because it is possible during January to see all of the planets if you haven't seen them all before. Jupiter at the minute is getting closer to the sunset. It's beginning to set not long after sunset. Likewise, Saturn, which is a little bit closer to the sun still. And Venus is on inferior conjunction, the 8th and 9th. And it transitions from being an evening star to the morning star. It'll be visible in the morning towards the end of January. It may even, I'll touch on this a bit later, be visible around inferior conjunction, because of course it is actually not, there's no transit this time, so it is actually quite well above the sun. Mercury is visible low in the southwest early in the month, and for the first sort of few days, the first couple of weeks, indeed, of January, you'll get a very good view of Mercury if you've got a good southwest horizon. Uranus, visible in Aries in the evening, magnitude 5.8, and Neptune in Aquarius, just down below the square of Pegasus, magnitude 7.8, below the head of Pisces, so that's worth looking out for. What we'll do now is we'll go and have a closer look with stellarium at all of those. Okay, so let's go and have a look at those planets. Now we're starting here looking southwest at 4:30 in the afternoon, so just after sunset on the 5th of January. And the first thing we're looking for is Venus. Now you do need a very good southwest horizon to see Venus, even though it is bright. It is It is magnitude 4.27, but of course we're looking through a lot of air here. In fact, at this point we're looking through about 12 air masses, and that reduces the magnitude to minus 2.6, but it should still be visible in a pair of binoculars with a decent enough horizon. Venus at this time is quite close to, it's actually at inferior conjunction on the 8th, on Saturday, and therefore you'd expect it to have disappeared by now, but actually because the solar system is not perfectly flat, then Venus actually misses the Sun by about 5 degrees to the northwards direction, and it is possible, if you know what you're doing, and don't do this unless you absolutely know what you're doing, it will be possible to see Venus in daylight in the middle of the day if you obstruct the Sun with a building and look at it through a telescope. Don't be doing that unless you know exactly what you're doing. It will be a very, very thin crescent there. In fact, if we sort of zoom in on Venus a bit here and just have a look at it, we will see that actually it is a very slightly illuminated crescent, still bright. Largely its albedo is huge, 0.77, and it's only at this point 3 days from inferior conjunction, so not much of Venus is illuminated at all. So we'll come back away from there and look at the other planets. A bit higher up in the sky and a bit further south, it should be possible to see Mercury. Now here's Mercury, and Mercury is also showing a bit of a phase actually. If we zoom in closer, not quite as extreme, but just over half. So something like a sort of 8 or 9 day moon is the phase on Mercury. Now, very difficult to see, even in a telescope, unless you've got a very good one. It will still look like a bright dot. But there's Mercury, and that actually gets a little bit better as the days go on. We'll just have a bit of animation there. Here's Mercury, so he gets a bit higher in the sky over the next few days. So that's the best chance to see Mercury. Now then, on the 5th, the moon here is a few days old, just about 2 or 3 days old there, and that's showing a nice crescent too. So we'll see the moon in with the planets there, and just a bit above the moon is Jupiter. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's just go back and look at, because Saturn is also visible. Here we go. Again, pretty low and needs a good telescope because we're looking through about 4.5 air masses here, so that does actually take a lot of detail out of Saturn. I got a picture of it before Christmas where you can see the rings and the general shape of it, but not very much detail. All that air just robs the picture of detail. But and Saturn generally looking aesthetically very pleasant at the minute. The rings are beginning to flatten out now. And by 2025 they'll be pretty much edge on, but we've got a little way to go before we get to that point. So there's Saturn. Right, and Jupiter is the next planet in the grouping here. Let's go and have a look at Jupiter. Jupiter is magnitude minus 1.7 after it's been through 2.5 air masses. And Jupiter actually, it's a good time to see Jupiter, 1630 on the 5th, because the great red spot is on the front of the disk there, and also the moons, the 4 Galilean moons, are arranged in the very aesthetically pleasant to either side configuration. They will change with days. In fact, if we sort of just move through days here, you can see how they move around really quite a lot for the next few days. But for now, Jupiter is getting very good. And there, so if we come right out of this much further, and we step forward just another hour to get complete darkness, then we should be able to find up here in Neptune. You should find Neptune. Yeah, now Neptune, where we find Neptune, let's have a look here. We'll head on up here to the Great Square of Pegasus, and that's easy to find. Then follow the western side of the Great Square of Pegasus downwards, Not quite as far as Jupiter, but a bit less, and we will find there. That gets us to the right sort of vicinity to be finding Neptune. And here's Neptune. Now Neptune, at this point, apparent magnitude with, again, 2 air masses. We're still quite low to the horizon, 8.1. So and it appears really in any amateur telescope as a blue dot. That's really as good as it gets. But if you zoom in a much closer, you can see some of the moons narrowed there. Triton is the only one you'll probably ever capture on a photograph easily, because it's the brightest, and even then it's only 13th magnitude, so very difficult to see. But that's Neptune, and we carry on further up the ecliptic still. And here we are into Aries. We've got the two main stars of Aries, Hamal and Sharatan. And below those, a few degrees below those, we have Uranus. Magnitude 5.72, that's down to 5.91, 1.5 air masses then, so quite high up in the sky actually, quite easy to see. And we zoom in, and in a small telescope, Uranus really appears as a green dot. But if you go in closer, you can see the 5 main moons, and that's Uranus. So that's a little tour of the planets. Now you can see Mars better towards the end of January. It's a morning object, so you'll need to be an early riser to get that, but we'll perhaps look at that another time, but because Mars will be coming back into the scene of things. So there's the planets. Okay, that's all I have to say for this month, other than stay safe, keep looking up, and thanks for watching.